You have this beautiful art in your
Yes.
office. Can you explain to me what it's about?
Obviously, you guys probably are aware of Biggest song. It was all a dream, or the phrase of it. This kind of represents every time we would achieve something along the way of our journey. He would play this song, so we felt it was right to put this on our wall.
Okay, Young. Thank you for letting me interview you.
Yeah.
Where were you born?
I was born in Seoul, South Korea.
How far is that from the North Korea border?
Um, I don't actually know. Let me look it up. I'm kind of curious. Okay. Yeah, actually, Seoul to DMZ is 35 miles.
What is the DMC?
So it's demilitarized zone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So technically, North Korea and South Korea are still at war. There's like armed soldiers at the DMZ, as well as like mines and stuff at the
Okay.
fenced location, and they're like pointing the gun at each other and stuff.
Still
Yeah,
at
so
war.
you can't cross.
Can you give me a history lesson? When did it become two Koreas as opposed to one?
This all happened like right before the Cold War. The Communist Army pushed down all the way to the South Korean peninsula, and then the US Army came from like the bottom part and they pushed up. And then where they ended the fight was the 38th parallel. All of a sudden, like the war breaks out on one day, and then you don't ever see your brother and sister or your mom and dad, and then it just stayed like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
To this day, it's like that.
For like 60 years. Yeah.
I had no idea how it had come about.
Yeah, so yeah, most people don't know. I think that it's also a little bit more unfortunate because it was like outside forces that separated the country like completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When was the first time that you heard of a border?
I think I was very little. In my memory, they taught you Bukhan, which is like the north nation, and then Namhan, which is the south nation. I just knew about it when I was very little.
And did it trigger like an emotion or anything?
It's weird because when you're in Korea, like when you say Japan, it's like enemy. That's like the emotion that it's elicited.
Yeah.
Like, same type of emotion with North Korea, but we're taught in schools that like they're our family. My thinking was like, okay, the regime is bad of North Korea and what they stand for is bad, but they're our people. And we always sing about like unifications and things like that when we were little, like in schools.
If I ask you where you're from, what do you say?
Okay, it depends on where I go.
Okay.
If I'm in like a foreign country now, I'll tell them like, hey, I'm from Texas or I'm from the States. And, like now I don't go tell them, it's like, yeah, I'm South Korean and I'm from Seoul.
And if you're in the States?
Let's say if I'm like in Texas, they'll be like, oh, where are you from? And I'll be like, yeah, like I'm from like Dallas or Austin, but I'm from Korea. Because usually like and people in the States they'll keep on asking me, it's like, oh, where are you really from? So
Yeah. You've been in the US, like you say, like more time than in North Korea.
Yeah.
And growing up with this like duality, you learn lessons from both sides.
Yeah, huge.
So
huge.
like what part of your heart does Korea have?
I think it's more complex. Like I think that it's really hard to be like, hey, like this aspect of me is this. Okay, if I was to explain it, I think the way I originally like start to think and do things like processing, I think like a Korean person. But then the actions that I sometimes take is more like Americanized. Like I don't know, like it's hard to explain.
Yeah.
And that's a clash that I have with my parents, because although they came to the States and they live in the States, they didn't have that like cultural like thing, because they still live, you know, they don't have a lot of exchanges with like American people. They hang out with like the Korean community.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of clash between like the way I think. It's like to them, I'm like what are you doing? Like be in business, like get a house, get a car, like you know, get married, like you know, what are you doing? Like
That's interesting because I always feel like when you're first generation American and your parents didn't grow up like assimilating into the culture, like their culture, like educationally and like socially, like their social constructs, everything is from another country.
yeah,
The first generation children always like live two realities, kind of like at home you have like one mentality, one way of thinking, the way things should be, and then when you're out like in school or like in business, then you like your American side is kind of and it's like a balancing
stuff. And that's another thing that sometimes like it helps me to view. It's like, oh, like I'm different in this way, and then like the Korean mentality is that. This is the reason that I like the States so much. Being in the States, like it really allows you to be yourself. way more than you would be in Korea. There is a way that you're supposed to behave. If you're outside of that, so like a pathway, then you're a failure. And in the States, like there are so many different ways to live it. Like you can be an artist, you can be a bum if you want to. So yeah, I think that's what I love the most about the States.